At my son's wedding, my wife was pushed into the mud in front of 200 guests. The bride laughed, and my son hugged not his mother, but her. I took the microphone not to yell. I took it so the whole room could finally see what they wanted to build their beautiful life on. The rain ended 20 minutes before we arrived. A damp, light haze still hung over the country club. The white arch by the pond gleamed as if it had just been wiped down for a photograph, and the stone path to the banquet hall was dark with water. I helped Sarah out of the car and felt her hold her breath. If you know the feeling when loved ones demand your silence for the sake of a pretty picture, listen to this story to the end. Take your time, I said. We are good. She nodded, adjusted the light pearl shawl on her shoulders, and looked at her shoes. After her illness, Sarah walked carefully, not slowly, not helplessly, but carefully, like someone who once had to renegotiate terms with her own body. She didn't like it when I offered my hand too obviously, but today she took it herself. The main thing is that Tommy doesn't see how scared I am of this walkway, she said quietly. It is a wedding after all. I wanted to tell her that our son was exactly the one who needed to see it, but I kept my mouth shut. The day wasn't meant for old grievances. Our only son was getting married. Sarah and I had lived for this minute, paid for half the banquet, and arranged the lighting and screens with the venue through my old industry guys. We had prepared the gift Tommy had been dreaming about for the last 2 years. It felt like today all the old, unspoken tensions could be shelved at least for the evening. A girl with a tablet stood at the entrance, smiling the way people smile at a list, not a person. Parents of the groom, she asked without looking up. The Millers. Yeah, I said. The girl ran her finger across the screen, and her smile grew thinner. You will go through the side entrance right there. It is more convenient, fewer guests in the aisle. On the seating chart over her shoulder, I caught a glimpse of something else. At the main entrance for the parents, there was no sign of our last name, no marker to greet us. The side door didn't lead to the hall, but to a narrow corridor wedged between the kitchen and the coat room. It smelled like dill-hot bread and wet umbrellas in there. Sarah didn't say a word, just squeezed my elbow a little tighter. I could see how badly she wanted to smile, because you can't walk into your son's wedding wearing resentment on your face. And I could see how that smile was already working against her. The hall was beautiful. 200 chairs in white covers, glass vases, a long head table on a slight riser, and a screen for the photo montage that I had personally asked to be checked twice. I still had too many habits left over from this business. When you spend 30 years running sound and light for other people's parties, your eye naturally hunts for cables, stands the backup mic, the line to the soundboard. I noted it mechanically. The gear was set right. Sam, the MC, was already in place, and Ryan, the venue tech, was hovering by the screen. Sam spotted me, raised a hand, and started to walk over. But a woman in a lilac suit leaned in to stop him, Eleanor Christine's mother. I knew her from 2 brief encounters. Now she was showing Sam a piece of paper, tapping her nail right in the middle of it, and turning her back to me. Mike Sarah whispered, "Which table are we at?" I found the place cards. The bride's parents were seated right next to the newlyweds. We were in the 3rd row, practically hugging a pillar, giving us a sideways view of the stage. Our card just read, Michael and Sarah. No last name, no parents of the groom. Sarah saw the card and lowered her eyes. I grabbed it and walked over to the coordinator. There is a mistake here. We are Tommy's parents. Her gaze slid somewhere over my shoulder, completely avoiding my eyes. The bride approved the seating chart. I was told you would be more comfortable away from the center, less foot traffic over there. I wanted to ask exactly who decided my wife would be more comfortable sitting by a pillar at her own son's wedding, but then I saw Tommy. He was walking toward us across the room in a light suit, handsome, a little flushed from the rush, wearing that exact expression he had since childhood, the one that appeared when he knew a choice had to be made, but he desperately wanted someone else to make it for him. "Dad, Mom, you made it," he said hurriedly, kissing Sarah on the cheek, as if he was afraid of leaving a lipstick smudge on someone else's script. "Everything good? Did they meet you?" "They met us," Sarah answered, "through the kitchen." Tommy blinked, looked at the coordinator, and gave me a smile. "Not her. It is just easier that way, Mom. With the rain, the tiles are slick. Christine was worried you might slip. Christine walked up to us. Her white dress fit without a single flaw. Every movement felt like part of a photo shoot. She wrapped her arm around Tommy's and looked at Sarah with a tenderness that made my blood run cold. "Sarah, you look so sweet," she said. "Just let's not play the hero today, okay? We have a lot of moving around, cameras, guests. If you get tired, the girls will show you to the lounge." "I am not tired," Sarah said. "Of course," Christine smiled. "I am just taking care of you." Tommy nodded the way people nod when the caring is already checked off the list. I saw the photographer behind Christine lower his camera. Not on his own. Eleanor had given him a two-finger signal. "Don't shoot the groom's parents yet." A tiny gesture, quick, practically invisible. But I had worked events my whole life, and I knew that the real power in a room usually lives in gestures exactly like that. "Tommy," I said quietly, "is Sam's toast schedule finalized?" My son flinched. "It is standard stuff. First Christine's parents, then friends, then we will see." "And where is the groom's mother?" I asked. Tommy rubbed his thumb over the wedding band he wasn't used to wearing yet. "Dad, don't start. We are on a tight timeline." Mom's voice shakes. "She will just upset herself. We are better off sitting down quietly at home later." Sarah stood beside us, pretending to study the flowers on the table. I knew that move. When she is hurting, her eyes search for an object to latch onto, so she doesn't have to look at a person. This time the object was a white rose in a glass vase. At home, I repeated, "And who is she today?" Christine squeezed Tommy's arm a little tighter. "Michael, let's not dramatize. We have a party for 200 people. Everything is scheduled to the minute. We can't rewrite the script for every relative." For every relative. That is how she talked about the woman who sold her grandmother's earrings so Tommy could pay for his freshman year. I felt the folder crunch in my jacket pocket. Inside was a certificate. A 1-year lease for a small venue in the historic district, plus a full rig of equipment on favorable terms. Not just a piece of paper with a dollar amount. It was a launch pad I had put together for my son through people who still respected my name. "We aren't changing the script," Tommy said. "Dad, there will be a moment for gifts later. You will say a few words. It will be beautiful. Christine even asked to put your contribution up on the screen. It means a lot to us." That was the moment I first understood. We hadn't been pushed aside because they forgot us. We were kept exactly where it was convenient to take from us, but inconvenient to show us. Sarah wasn't supposed to speak as a mother. I was supposed to speak as a wallet. On stage, Sam tested the microphone. A brief hum rolled through the room, and all the guests turned their heads toward the couple. Christine straightened up her face, shifted into party mode. "Dear guests," Sam began, "in a few minutes we will head out to the arch for a group photo. But for now, I would like to ask the parents of the newlyweds to step forward." Christine's parents stood up first. The bride's father adjusted his cufflinks. Eleanor smiled at the room with the air of a woman hosting a royal reception. Sarah took a step, but Tommy put his hand out, barely noticeable. "Mom, wait, they are going to shoot them first, then everyone together." Sarah stopped. Not because she believed him, but because she didn't want to argue in front of the guests. I saw two women at the next table exchange a look. One whispered something short to the other and looked down at Sarah's shoes, at how carefully my wife held herself, and at our third-row spot by the pillar. In seconds, like that humiliation doesn't sound loud yet, but it is already claiming its seat in the room. Sam walked over to us. Into the microphone, he was all smiles, but off mic, his face went dead serious. "Mike, I didn't write this order," he said almost soundlessly. "They sent me revisions this morning. Sarah isn't in the first block." "Who sent them?" He shifted his eyes toward Eleanor, then to Christine. "Got it," I said. Sarah had heard enough. She touched my sleeve. "Not right now, please. Let Tommy have his day." This was how she always defeated me. Not with weakness, not with tears, but with the fact that she could take her own pain and place it lower than someone else's joy. I covered her hand with mine and decided I would give my son one more chance. Not Christine, not her mother, my son. Outside, the photographer was already wrangling the guests. After the rain, the path to the arch was gleaming. At the edge of the lawn, the soaked earth looked dark and heavy. Christine stood in the center, white, radiant, absolute. She turned to the photographer and spoke just loud enough for me to hear. "Let's get Sarah over here closer to the edge just for a minute. Careful, though, we don't want to clutter the frame." The guests flowed toward the arch, loudly holding drinks and phones buzzing with that light joy people get when the official part hasn't started yet, but it is time to collect pretty pictures. The air smelled like wet grass and sweet flowers after the rain. The white runner laid out for the arch stopped shorter than it should have. Right at the edge of the lawn, there was a strip of raw, wet earth covered in flower petals. In the daylight, it probably looked like a decorator's clever idea. Up close, you could see the petals were just hiding the mud. "Sarah, over here, please," the photographer called out. "A little to the left. No, just a bit more." I took a step alongside my wife, but Christine turned to me. "Michael, why don't you stand next to Tommy for now? It works better compositionally." Compositionally. I almost laughed bitterly, but Sarah quietly touched my hand. She was still trying to save this day from ourselves. Tommy stood between me and Christine, smiling for the camera, never looking at his mother. I could tell he heard every direction, but he played it off like the photographer was just moving props around. Near the edge of the path, a young waitress named Daisy was working. She had come out with a tray of water for the guests, but got stuck because her path was blocked. A phone was sticking out of her breast pocket, camera facing out. A red recording dot was blinking on the screen. She was probably filming the decorated arch for herself or sending a quick video to a friend. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. Christine leaned in toward her bridesmaid in the silver dress. Her smile didn't waver, but her voice dropped an octave. "Once the old lady goes to dry off, the frame will be clean. Just don't stand behind me." I only caught a fragment. Not every word, not the full meaning. Sarah shifted her weight from the stone to the wet edge of the path. "Careful," I said, reaching for her. Christine was faster. She adjusted her veil, pivoted toward the photographer, and made a show of clearing space for the shot. Her shoulder drove softly, almost invisibly, right into Sarah's side. It wasn't a strike. It wasn't a motion that warranted a scream. She shoved her. And that was exactly why it was so terrifying. A stranger's hand did it flawlessly, making the fall look like nothing more than an old woman's clumsiness. Sarah swayed. Her shoe slid across the wet stone. Her heel slipped off the edge, and she went down hard into the mud by the lawn, throwing her hand out to catch herself. The sound was brief. Not a scream, just a choked exhale. Then that foul silence ripped through the crowd, the kind where everyone knows exactly what just happened, but they are waiting to see who gives permission to name it first. A dark stain spread rapidly across Sarah's pearl dress. The shawl slipped off her shoulder. She wasn't crying. She wasn't looking at Christine or the guests. She was looking at Tommy. I stepped toward her. "Mom," Tommy finally said, but he stayed planted right where he was, stepping nowhere near her. Christine pressed her hand to her mouth. For the camera, it might have looked like shock. To me, it looked like a suppressed laugh. Her bridesmaid in the silver dress turned away a second too late. A few younger guests giggled, not quite sure yet if they were allowed to laugh out loud. I dropped to one knee beside Sarah and offered her both my hands. "Don't jump up, get your footing first." "I have got it," she whispered. "Not today," I said. I helped her up. Mud clung to her from the hem of her dress all the way to her thigh. Sarah tried to cover the stain with her shawl, but the fabric was light-colored and instantly soaked through with the same filth. The photographer lowered his camera. Sam froze near the arch with his microphone, unsure whether to drop a festive joke. Tommy walked over to Christine, not to Sarah, not to me, to her. He wrapped his arms around his bride's shoulders, as if she was the one who needed protecting right now, and said quietly, "It is okay, don't worry." Christine buried her face in his chest, her shoulders shaking. From a distance, it might have looked like she was crying, but I was standing close enough to hear the laugh. Short, smothered, vicious, full of relief. It worked. Sarah heard it too. She didn't look up, but her fingers turned to ice against my hand. Tommy whispered, "Stop it, people are staring." "It is not my fault," she said loud enough for the nearest guest to hear. She stumbled back slightly on purpose. I warned her it was wet over here. Eleanor materialized instantly. She already had a napkin in her hands, but she handed it to Christine, not Sarah. Sweetheart, stop shaking. It is just nerves. The wedding, the rain, elderly relatives. That word elderly landed on Sarah heavier than the mud. A few guests smiled sympathetically, but the sympathy was pointing in the wrong direction. They were being handed a comfortable narrative. The bride got a scare, the older woman lost her footing. Now the groom's father might make a scene. If I snapped, I would give them exactly what they needed. I looked at Tommy. Go to your mother. He stiffened. Dad, give me a second. Let Christine catch her breath. Your mother is standing in the mud. I see it. He said it too sharply and the crowd heard it. Christine lifted her head, the laughter gone, replaced by watery eyes that showed up with incredible timing. Tommy, don't, Sarah whispered. Not in front of everyone. That plea hit harder than his refusal. She was protecting him even now, while all around us phones were rising into the air, capturing not the truth, but the stain. I could have said everything right then. I could have grabbed Tommy by the lapels, spun Christine around to face the dirt, and screamed at the guests about what they had just witnessed. But I knew rooms like this too well. The first one to yell loses the truth. That is all they will remember later. Not the shove, not the laugh, not the son's hand on a stranger's shoulder. Just the crazy old man who ruined the wedding. I took off my jacket and draped it over Sarah's shoulders. We are going inside, Mike, she said, just moving her lips. No scandals. Not now. I looked at Sam. He understood without a word and pulled the mic away from his mouth. Then he did what good hosts do. He gave the room a command before the room could invent its own. All right, folks, taking a quick 2-minute pause. Looks like the rain decided to crash the wedding too. Don't go anywhere, we will be right back at it. A few guests laughed in relief. They had been handed an exit. The awkwardness was just the weather. The mud was just a joke. Sarah was just a quick pause. I led her toward the staff entrance. Daisy stepped back with her tray and suddenly said, I am sorry, don't come through here. I mean, let me help you, I am just sorry. Even though she hadn't done a thing. I noticed her pale face and the phone still in her pocket, but I didn't have time for her right now. Behind us, Christine was already projecting her voice. Everything is fine, really. Sarah just got spooked. We did warn everyone it was slippery after the rain. Eleanor chimed right in. She should have just waited inside. Her age, her blood pressure, those heels. Why play the hero? And a few people were already nodding because it was simply more convenient for the party. Tommy didn't say a word. My son's silence walked beside me, heavier than the wet jacket on Sarah's shoulders. In the service hallway, she stopped against the wall. Only then did her face break. Give me a minute, she said. I opened the nearest door. It was a small break room for the staff. An ironing board, boxes of napkins, a bucket of clean water, coats hanging on hooks. Sarah walked in and sat down on a chair so carefully it looked like she was apologizing to the furniture. I grabbed a towel from a stack, wet the edge, and knelt in front of her. Did you twist your ankle? No, my hand. Mike, stop checking me like I am a piece of gear before a banquet. I froze. She tried to smile, but her lips were trembling. I am sorry. For what? Sarah asked. You picked me up. I gently wiped the mud from her palm. A red scrape was already blooming on her skin. On her dress, the stain wasn't fading. It was spreading wider, as if the fabric was still falling even after Sarah had stood up. Outside the door, the music kicked back in. Sam was pulling the guests back into the celebration. Somebody laughed. Glasses clinked so casually that I wanted to march out there and smash the sound against the floor. But Sarah put her hand on my shoulder. Don't start a war over a dress. It is not about the dress. She stayed quiet for a long time, then looked me dead in the eye, and I saw there was no shame there. Shame was what they were trying to force on her. She carried a different kind of pain, old and new, at the exact same time. I fell and he hugged her, Sarah said. That is what I am going to remember. Not the mud, not the guests, his hand on Christine's shoulder. I didn't have an answer. Any words meant for comfort would have been a lie. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, fast, nervous. Then Tommy's voice. Dad, Mom, let's just stay calm. Christine is crying and the guests are waiting. Sarah closed her eyes. I stood up, and for the first time that evening, I knew. If my son walked through that door pushing someone else's narrative, I was done being the father who smooths out the rough edges. Tommy walked in without knocking. He was still in that light suit, handsome, put together. The only crack was a thin bead of sweat on his temple. Christine's shadow flickered behind him, but she didn't cross the threshold. Smart. Send the son in first to soften up the dirty work. Mom, how are you? He asked. Sarah looked up at him. For a split second, I saw her almost look happy just to hear the question. Almost. Because he was standing by the door, refusing to come closer, gripping the handle like he was ready to bolt back out to the music at any second. I am alive, she said. Well, good. Tommy exhaled entirely too fast. Thank God. Then let's not make this a whole thing. Christine really didn't mean it. It was slick out there, everybody saw it. I tossed the dirty towel onto the edge of the table. Everybody saw your mother fall. Not everybody saw why. Dad, why are you doing this? He finally looked at me. It is my wedding. You could ruin our lives right now with one word. Our lives. Not his mother's, not his parents. His and Christine's. Tommy, Sarah said softly. I am not asking for much. Just come over here. He took one step, then stopped. Outside, someone called out, Tommy, they need you for pictures. The voice was a woman's, not Christine's, but my son heard the command of the entire room in it. Mom, I will be right there. Let's just get back to normal first. Christine is crying. This is hard on her too. Sarah nodded so slowly, it looked like she was signing a document she refused to read. First, tell her one simple thing, I said. Tell her you saw Christine shove her, and that your mother did absolutely nothing wrong. Tommy looked at the door, not at Sarah, at the door where his applause was waiting. Sarah pulled my hand away. She didn't want me holding it instead of her son. Dad, I can't just walk out there right now and announce that my wife pushed my mother, Tommy said. You know exactly what that is going to look like the truth, like a scandal. It became a scandal the second she laughed. He flinched like I had hit him, but again he wouldn't look at his mother. Sarah sat next to me, her fingers folded in her lap, pulling the muddy fabric tight so the stain would look smaller. Watching her try to hide someone else's guilt under her shawl was almost unbearable. Christine wasn't laughing at Mom, Tommy said. She was hysterical. It was a nervous reaction. You heard a laugh. I heard noise. There are 200 people out there. Did you see who he hugged? He finally locked eyes with me. There was anger in them, but not at Christine. At me because I was forcing him to name the thing he had already decided never to name. You want me to humiliate my wife in front of everyone, right now? He asked. Sarah shuddered. I saw her grip the edge of the chair. No, I said. I want you to stop humiliating your mother to protect your wife from the consequences of her own actions. Tommy went quiet. Out in the hall, someone laughed. A short musical sting played. The wedding was moving on, acting like there wasn't a woman sitting in a dirty dress in a supply closet. We will sort it out later, my son said. I promise. After the reception. No guests, no cameras, no scene. He said scene, and he realized instantly he was using Christine's vocabulary. A soft knock came at the door. Tommy, Eleanor's voice drifted in. Honey, the photographers are waiting. And Christine really can't cry right now. Her makeup. It is just not an option. Sarah, do you need any help? The bride's makeup was more urgent than the mud on the mother's dress. Tommy closed his eyes. He had been handed a comfortable rope, and he grabbed it with both hands. The door swung open before anyone answered. Christine walked in, dabbing a napkin near her eyes. Her mascara hadn't run, her lipstick was flawless, her veil sat perfectly. She was crying neatly like a person who knows exactly which angle the camera is catching. I can't do this, she said to Tommy. Everyone thinks I did it on purpose and I just turned around. It is not my fault. Sarah walked out onto the wet stones in heels. Sarah lifted her head. You hit me with your shoulder. Christine looked at her with such pure shock, as if a dirty dress meant Sarah had forfeited her right to a memory. Sarah, please, you are in shock right now. Don't project this onto me. Do not speak to her like that, I said. Christine shrank behind Tommy. See, I told you your dad has hated me since the day we met. Now he is going to turn me into a monster. Tommy spun toward me fully armed. Dad, enough. Do you hear how this sounds? I hear it, I said. It sounds like a woman in a clean dress, explaining to a woman in a dirty dress that she brought it on herself. Christine sobbed louder. Someone stopped outside the door. I knew the words were already bleeding out into the hall, and if the truth wasn't spoken plainly right now in 5 minutes, the room would be handed a pre-packaged legend. The bride was pushed to the brink. The elderly mother made a mistake. The father threw a tantrum. Tommy, I said, one question. Did you see Christine hit your mother? He stayed silent. One question, I repeated. Not about the wedding, not about the makeup, not about the guests. Christine whispered, if you say yes right now, you are betraying me. And that is when Tommy made his choice. Quietly, ugly, almost exhausted. I didn't see a push. I saw Mom lose her footing. Sarah didn't cry. She just took her hands off her lap and slowly stood up. I reached out to help, but she gave her head a tiny shake. Now it was vital she stood up on her own, because her son had already refused to offer his hand. All right, she said. That all right didn't mean agreement. It meant something inside her had stopped waiting. Tommy stepped toward her, but too late and entirely too cautiously. Mom, don't be like this. I am not against you. I just honestly didn't see it. It all happened in a second. Did you see who you hugged? Sarah asked. Christine grabbed his arm, openly this time, tightly the way you grab a possession someone might steal. Tommy, let's go. If we don't go out there right now, people are going to think we are having a catastrophe. You have a mother covered in mud right here, I said. Michael, her voice dropped to sub-zero. If you want to blackmail us with the gift, just say it. Just don't hide behind Sarah. There it was, the gift. She brought it up herself right here in a room that still smelled like wet fabric. I looked at Tommy, he wasn't surprised. That meant they had already discussed the possibility of me using it as leverage. That meant in their minds, my gift had long ceased to be a gesture of love and had become a lever they needed to yank out of my hands before the scandal hit. The door cracked open again. Eleanor didn't walk in, but she spoke loud enough. Kids, the guests are waiting for an explanation. I will tell them Sarah felt faint because of her blood pressure. And slipped. Michael got upset. Nothing terrible. Everyone is alive. Everyone is alive. As if humiliation required a body count before you were allowed to stop the music. No, I said. Eleanor looked at me for the first time without her party smile. No what? You will not speak for my wife. Then speak for yourself, Eleanor shot back. Just remember there are 200 guests out there, photographers, video. You ruin this wedding, it sticks to you, not us. She was wrong, but she didn't know it yet. Tommy grabbed onto that phrase like his last chance to look like a man. Dad, really, please, let us finish the ceremony. I will come over later, we will talk. I will apologize if I have to. If you have to, Sarah echoed. The room went dead silent. Even Christine stopped sniffing. Mom, that is not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. Sarah took my jacket off her shoulders and draped it over the back of the chair. She wasn't trying to hide the mud stain anymore. Go on, Tommy. Your guests are waiting. The bride is crying. The makeup. He went pale. Mom, come on. Outside, Sam must have gotten the signal. His voice rolled to the speakers, smooth, professional. A lifesaver for everyone except us. All right, everybody, make your way back into the room. The newlyweds will be joining us in just a moment to keep this party going. Christine was the first to turn toward the exit. At the threshold, she paused and threw a quick glance over her shoulder at me. No tears left. The look was a pure warning. Try to ruin this and we will make you the villain. Tommy followed her out. Eleanor left the door cracked open just enough to keep an eye on us. Sarah sat back down, suddenly looking very small in this room full of napkin boxes. Mike, she said, don't beg him anymore. I won't. I picked the wet towel up off the floor. Down the hall, the footsteps of my son faded away. The son who could have gotten his mother back just a minute ago with one honest word and chose not to. Sam announced the first toast. The room erupted in applause, and I knew that if I stayed silent now, that clapping would become the lid, sealing the truth in a coffin. I didn't walk out. First, I helped Sarah move to a chair further from the door and found a clean fleece blanket in the cabinet with the venue's logo on it. The name of the country club was stitched in gold thread, and on any other day, I would have laughed. Even a borrowed blanket looked more festive in here than her dress did after Christine's accident. "I will sit here," Sarah said. "Go see what they are saying." "I am not leaving you alone, Mike. I am not alone as long as you stop begging for me." She said it evenly without an ounce of reproach. But there was a new boundary in that evenness. Sarah didn't want me following our son around, holding her pain out like a beggar's cup. She wanted me to finally see that the begging was more degrading than the mud. I stepped out into the hall and stood by the heavy service curtain where I had a clear view of the room. The music dropped low. The stage lights warmed up. Sam was holding the mic, but he wasn't using his normal voice. Too smooth, too careful. "Folks, sometimes at a live event, we get a little hiccup," he said. "The main thing is everyone is together, everyone is healthy, and everyone loves each other." I saw Eleanor give him an approving nod from the front row, meaning the script had already been cleared through her. A little hiccup. That is what they were calling my wife's fall in front of 200 people. Tommy and Christine stood by the sweetheart table. He was holding her hand. She leaned her shoulder against his, angled perfectly for the room to see. "Pity the bride." Sam paused and added, "And now a word from the groom." Tommy wanted to say a few important words before the first family toast. The guests applauded with relief. Their comfortable order had been restored. The hiccup was in the rear view. The kids were in the spotlight, and the older folks were safely tucked backstage. The MC was driving the party again. Tommy took the microphone. I remembered his first middle school presentation, how he gripped his index cards, how Sarah sat in the front row mouthing every word along with him so he wouldn't lose his place. Back then he searched the room for her eyes. Now he looked right over everyone's heads. "Guys, thank you so much for being here with us," he said. "Today is a massive day, and I want us all to remember it in a good light." Christine looked up at him. Somewhere in the crowd, someone let out an audible, touched sigh. There are moments when emotions, exhaustion, the rain. Tommy took a breath. "Not everything goes perfectly, but that is what makes a family strong. We don't blow little accidents out of proportion." My jaw clenched. Little accidents. He was parroting someone else's formula, just making it his own. "My mom," he went on, "got a little spooked outside. She is resting right now. She is completely fine. And I am really asking you guys, let's not turn this into a topic of conversation. We are here to celebrate." Guests nodded. Not all of them, but enough. A crowd loves order more than the truth. If the groom says mom is fine, that means it is safe to pour the champagne again. I stood behind the curtain and felt something inside me turn to ice. Until this exact second, I could still tell myself, he is weak. He panicked. He is scared of Christine. Now he was holding the microphone and using his own words to turn Sarah into an inconvenience. Not Christine, not Eleanor, my son. Sam looked at the floor. He heard the difference, too, between calming the crowd and erasing a mother. Tommy smiled, and it almost looked like his old smile. "Thank you guys for understanding. Mom, if you can hear this, we love you. We love you." Broadcast over a microphone while she sat in a supply closet in a ruined dress. Behind me, Sarah heard it through the monitors and quietly pulled the door shut. Sam raised the mic again. I could tell by the set of his shoulders he wanted to skip this next block, but the script had him by the throat. "And now, folks, a very special moment," he said. "Parents always give their kids the most valuable things they have. Sometimes it is not just love. Sometimes it is a real launch pad." A graphic flashed onto the screen behind the couple. A gift from the Miller family. I froze. I hadn't approved that slide. Ryan at the soundboard glanced at the crowd, then shot a look toward the kitchen. That meant my guys didn't give him that file. Christine stood up straighter. Tommy lowered his mic, completely unsurprised. A slideshow started playing. Me and Sarah outside the old venue. Tommy doing his restaurant internship. Me standing next to a lighting rig. At the top, in massive letters, the first venue for our future family business. Our future. They had already turned my gift into a piece of their mythology. Not a transferred document, not a signed contract, but a promise I was keeping in a folder. They had weaponized it into public property. The crowd clapped. Someone yelled, "Now that is a dad." I felt the praise slice right through me. Just a minute ago, in this exact room, my wife had been written off as an awkward hiccup. Now I was being paraded around as the generous centerpiece of the wedding. The convenient father, the convenient mother silently drying off behind a door. Convenient money. Eleanor raised her glass and said to her table, loud enough to carry, "Michael can be a bit sharp, but he loves his family. He understands how things work. He understands, meaning he will swallow it." Tommy took Christine's hand and turned toward the screen. They stood under that slide like the rightful owners of a future that 5 minutes ago was being built on Sarah's silence. I reached into my inside pocket and checked the folder. The certificate was still there. Without my signature on the last page, it was just a promise, not a transfer. Christine took the mic from Tommy. Her voice trembled just enough for the room to hear how fragile she was. "Tommy and I are so incredibly grateful," she said, especially to Michael and Sarah. "I know we had a tough moment today, but a real family proves itself by not holding on to resentment." The room applauded again. Now they weren't clapping for the gift, they were clapping for the perfect bride, magnanimously forgiving her elders for being such an inconvenience. I saw a few guests turn to look at the service door where Sarah was sitting, and in those looks there was already an expectation. Well, is she going to come out and support the kids or what? Christine kept going. "Sarah, if you can hear us, we really want you to come back out. Don't hide, we are all family here." I practically felt the physical weight of that sentence press Sarah into her chair. "Don't hide," said to the woman she had personally shoved into the mud. Tommy smiled, full of gratitude. Either he didn't get it, or he chose not to. "Mom," he said into the mic, "we are waiting for you." People started turning around. First the front row, then the second, then the tables in the back. 200 people weren't looking at Christine anymore. They were staring at the supply closet door. They were waiting for Sarah to walk out, smile, let herself be hugged, and officially confirm, "Yes, everything really is fine." That was the real trap. Not the shove, not the mud, but the demand to walk out and pay for someone else's lie with her own smile. I stepped toward the door, but Sarah opened it herself. The fleece blanket was wrapped around her shoulders. The bottom of her dress was still caked in dirt. She didn't walk into the room, she just stood in the doorway. The clapping died down. People saw the stain, not as a hiccup, but as a fact. Christine lost her smile for a fraction of a second, then quickly raised her glass. "See, everything is wonderful." Sarah didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't make a single gesture that could be sliced into a wedding highlight reel as a moment of reconciliation. She just stood there, and the longer she stood, the quieter the room got. Tommy sensed the danger first. "Mom, come up here with us," he said, the smooth MC tone gone from his voice. "Please." "What for?" Sarah asked. The microphone caught that one short phrase. It blasted through the speakers, and the room didn't hear a hysterical woman or a scandal. They heard a genuine question from a woman who was just ordered to corroborate a lie. Christine forced a laugh. "To give us a hug, obviously. We are not going to let a little spot on a dress ruin things." "That is enough," I said. I stepped out from behind the curtain, not toward the stage. First to Sarah, I took her hand, but I didn't pull her into the room. If I walked her over to the newlyweds right then, I would become a prop in their play. Michael Eleanor stood up from her table. "Let's skip the theatrics. We all already know Sarah is upset." "No," I said. "You just realize you don't get to speak for her." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Tommy went pale. "Dad, don't." That didn't sound like a son's plea anymore. It sounded like the sheer panic of a man realizing his father wasn't standing on his assigned mark. Sam was watching me, mic in hand. I didn't grab for it yet. It wasn't time. All I had was pain. And pain without proof was just something they would call a tantrum. And then at the edge of the service corridor, Daisy appeared. The waitress with the tray. The tray was gone. She was holding her phone in both hands, staring at me like she was psyching herself up to walk into traffic. "Mr. Miller," she said quietly, "you need to see this." Daisy held the phone like it was a scalding cup of coffee. She wasn't looking at the room. She was looking at me, and her face had that exact expression I had seen on 100 rookie catering kids over the years. The look of someone who realizes they have just stepped onto a landmine of family trauma, but knows keeping quiet makes them an accomplice. "What is it?" I asked. "I was filming the arch for my sister," she whispered. "I just wanted to show her how pretty the wedding was. And then I didn't realize at first what I actually recorded." She hit play with the sound off, then nervously clicked the volume up one notch. On the screen was the arch, the wet path, Sarah near the edge, Christine leaning toward her bridesmaid. The video was shaky because Daisy had been walking with a tray, but the audio was crystal clear. "Once the old lady goes to dry off, the frame will be clean. Just don't stand behind me." Then Christine's shoulder, the fall, the laugh. I didn't look up right away. Until that exact second, I had still been harboring a dangerous, stupid hope that I was overestimating how vicious this was. The video slaughtered that hope. Sarah stood next to me, blanket on her shoulders, watching not the fall, but the seconds right before it. The sentence she planned out in advance. "She planned it," Sarah whispered. Daisy locked the screen. "I am so sorry, I didn't know who to show it to. The manager told me to delete it because guests will complain that the staff is filming." "Who told you to delete it?" Daisy glanced over her shoulder. Standing at the entrance to the service hallway was the venue manager in a black suit. "Her," Daisy said. The manager saw the phone and power walked toward us. "Daisy, staff recording is strictly prohibited. Hand over the device, we are writing you up." The girl went ghost white. The truth was about to cost her a job and her whole shift's pay. I stepped between Daisy and the manager. "It is her personal phone. You aren't taking it." Mr. Miller, the manager, shifted into that aggressive customer service politeness used to mask a threat. "It is venue policy. Staff are not permitted to film guests." She didn't film a guest. She filmed an assault. That is for management to decide. "No, that is for Daisy to decide." The girl swallowed hard. I hadn't asked her to play the hero, but if she handed over that phone now, the video vanished. And with it, the only thing separating the truth from my word against theirs. Eleanor marched over from the dining room. She wasn't smiling anymore. "What is going on here?" The manager leaned in. "The employee recorded the incident by the arch. Mr. Miller is preventing me from processing the violation." Eleanor turned to Daisy. "Little girl, do you understand you are going to ruin people's wedding over your own stupidity? Delete it, apologize to your boss, and everyone forgets this happened." Daisy looked at me, then at Sarah. Sarah wasn't asking for anything. She was just standing there in her blanket and ruined dress. Sometimes you don't need to ask if the price is standing right in front of you. "I am not deleting it," Daisy said. Eleanor drew herself up. "Then we will call your general manager." "Call him," I said, "and tell him the groom's father has already seen the footage." The manager went just as pale as Daisy. She understood the market. If a venue was caught confiscating evidence of something like this, it didn't just ruin a shift. It tanked the country club's reputation. Venues like this spend years building trust. Trust that a guest won't get screwed in the hallway, that a camera won't become an enemy, that the staff won't cover up someone else's cruelty just to secure a 5-star review. But Eleanor wasn't backing down. "Tommy," she called into the hall, "get over here." My son walked over a minute later. Christine naturally shadowed him. The slideshow was still looping on the big screen. The guests were staring at photos of a future business, completely baffled as to why the newlyweds had vanished toward the service doors again. "What now?" Tommy asked. And in that now, there was already exhaustion. Not with what happened, but with us. I took the phone from Daisy, but only after she held it out to me herself. Look at this. Dad, don't. Look at it. I hit play. For the first few seconds, his face was just annoyed. Then Christine's line about the old lady in the clean frame played. Tommy jerked back like the audio had physically slapped him. Christine lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. That is taken out of context, she said. I was joking, it was loud out there. And the shoulder check, I asked. I turned around. The laugh. I was hysterical. Tommy didn't say a word. This time he saw it. He couldn't unsee it. His entire defense perimeter died right there in his hands. Tell her, Sarah said. Tell her what you see now. My son looked up at his mother, and for a split second, I saw the little boy who broke a vase and was waiting for Sarah to say, "It is okay as long as you didn't cut yourself." But standing next to him were Christine and Eleanor, in the future venue on the screen, and 200 guests who had already been fed a different story. "We have to get rid of this," Tommy said. Sarah took a half step back. "What?" "Not because it is your fault, Mom, because if this gets out, the wedding is over. They will tear Christine apart, her mom, the guests, everyone, and it was fine to tear me apart." He didn't answer. Christine let out a sob. "If you love me, you won't let them show this." And once again, love demanded that he shove his mother behind a closed door. "Daisy," I said without looking at Christine, "send that to your cloud, right now." The manager flinched. "You cannot distribute materials containing guests to third parties." "She is sending her own video to herself," I said. "And if it mysteriously deletes, I will announce your last name on a microphone to every vendor working in this building today." I said it calmly. Not because I was calm, but because I knew that screaming gives the enemy an excuse not to listen to the words. The manager shut her mouth. Daisy's fingers flew across the screen. Her hands were shaking, but she hit send. Eleanor turned to my son. "Tommy, are you a man or not? Take the phone. This is your wedding." It was the first time I saw that woman rushing instead of managing. That meant the video was far more dangerous than she was pretending. Tommy took a step toward me. "Dad, give it to me. I will handle it." "You already handled it. On a microphone. Don't destroy me here." "I am not destroying you. I am stopping you from destroying your mother." Christine snapped. "Why is it always about your mother? It is our wedding. I shouldn't have to spend the rest of my life paying for the fact that someone couldn't stay on her feet." The words hung in the hallway. We weren't the only ones who heard them. Standing near the entrance were two waiters, Ryan, the AV guy, and a guest holding a drink. Christine realized it a second too late. "That is not what I meant," she backpedaled. Sarah looked at her with total calm. "It is exactly what you meant." Ryan, standing by his board, pretended to adjust a cable, but said quietly to me, "If you need the screen, I can cast it straight from the phone. No delay. They will lock me out of the system right after, though." The stakes just got higher. Daisy, Ryan, Sam, complete strangers were starting to pay the toll for our family's truth, and I had no right to throw them under the bus for a dramatic moment. Eleanor pulled out her phone. "Steve," she barked into it, "we have a situation at the service doors. The groom's father is disrupting the event. Staff is distributing unauthorized recordings of guests. Bring security." She kept her voice low, but loud enough for me to catch every syllable. Now they were upgrading me from a father to a venue security threat. That was the next play. Don't argue with the truth, just remove the guy holding it. Tommy heard it too and suddenly panicked. "Mom, no, please, no security." Eleanor shot him a frigid look. "Then fix it yourself." He turned to me. "Dad, please, let's do it like this." Daisy deletes the video. "I will go out there with Mom. Right now, we will take a big group photo, and then I will have a serious talk with Christine. I swear." "You already swore you would do it after the reception." "I didn't know about the video then. Now you do." He went quiet. Sarah was standing right next to me, looking at him in a way that made my own chest tight. She wasn't waiting for a victory. One sentence would have been enough. "Mom, I am sorry I lied." But her son was looking for a plea deal. "If they show this," Tommy said, "it will destroy Christine." "No," Sarah replied. "It will just show her." Christine turned away. The music was still pumping into the room, but it sounded completely wrong now. Way too cheerful for a hallway where people were deciding who owned the right to a memory. Two security guards appeared at the entrance. Not aggressive, not angry, just two guys in dark suits hired to quietly remove a problem. Behind them walked the gray-haired general manager of the venue. He recognized me. "Mike, Victor," I said. "Your staff is currently trying to force an employee to delete footage of the intentional assault of my wife." The GM looked at Daisy, at the floor manager, at Sarah's mud-caked dress, and at Eleanor. His face turned to stone. "Nobody deletes anything he ordered." Eleanor turned white. And I realized I didn't have a victory yet, but I had a window. If I didn't take it right now, the room would be sealed back up in someone else's script. Victor didn't launch an investigation in the hallway. That was his first smart move. "All personnel issues will be handled after the event," he told the floor manager. "Do not touch the employee's phone. Pull Daisy off the floor for 10 minutes so nobody pressures her." Daisy let out a breath like she had been holding it for an hour. I gave her a nod, but I didn't thank her out loud. Thanking her in front of Eleanor would sound like a conspiracy. "Victor," I said, "I need 1 minute on the screen and a microphone." He looked into the ballroom. The slide about my gift was still glowing up there. The newlyweds had been gone way too long. The guests were starting to twist in their seats, staring at the service doors. "Mike, you know this is going to be a bomb going off." "The bomb already went off. You are just looking at the smoke." Eleanor cut in. "Absolutely no screens. This is a private event paid for by us." "Half of this banquet was paid for by me," I said. "But this isn't about money." Of course, Christine laughed bitterly. "When you need leverage, you bring up the money. When you want to look noble, you talk about honor." Sarah answered first. "He is bringing up the money because you already plastered it on a giant screen." Christine shut her mouth. That one short sentence hit harder than any of my anger. Victor looked at Ryan at the soundboard. "Leave the screen alone for now. The MC has the mics." Eleanor caught the words "for now" and stormed toward the stage. "Sam, we are moving on with the program. No improvising." She snatched his clipboard, ripped out the top sheet, and shoved a new one in. I saw a massive note written in red Sharpie. "First dance, immediately." The dance was supposed to bury the pause, the screen, the gift, the mud, the mother. Everything right up until the next toast and the sound of guests laughing. I reached Sam before he could step up onto the riser. "Sammy," I said quietly, "I have a contract with the venue. I can't just hand over a mic for a family fight. It is not a family fight. It is a public lie that you are about to validate with a soundtrack." He gripped his clipboard. "You know how this business works. The MC isn't the judge. I am not asking you to judge. I am asking you not to be their curtain." Sam closed his eyes, exhausted. We had known each other for 20 years. He had hosted my clients' anniversaries, my niece's wedding, the memorial for my old mentor. Times when he had to speak carefully so people wouldn't fall apart. He wasn't a hero, just a pro who knew exactly what a live microphone cost. "1 minute," I said, "then you take it back." "And what are you going to say?" "First a question for my son, then the video. If they cut the sound, the room will see exactly who is terrified of 1 minute." Sam looked at the stage. Tommy was already up there with Christine getting ready for the dance. She was smiling at the crowd, but her fingers were digging into his hand so hard her knuckles were white. "I have a second mic," Sam said, barely moving his lips, "for the games. It is on the side table by the vase. But if I physically hand it to you right now, they will say I hijacked the event. Don't hand it to me. Leave it where I can grab it when you call my name." He stared at me for a long time, then gave one sharp nod. Christine grabbed the main mic off the stand. "Everyone's so sorry for the delay," she projected to the room. The older generation got a little overwhelmed. "Michael just needs a minute to collect himself, so we are going to keep the party moving." Collect himself. The guest looked over at me not as a father, but as a man having a meltdown. She gave me a diagnosis. Not a dangerous truth teller, just a crazy old man. Ryan caught my eye from the soundboard. He didn't wave, didn't nod, obviously. He just killed the slide about my gift, and threw up the venue's default screensaver. A white background, some flowers, the wedding date. To the guests, it looked like a technical glitch. To me, it looked like a blank canvas waiting for paint. Eleanor noticed. "Why did you take the slide down?" she demanded loudly. Ryan answered without missing a beat. "File refresh." Screen was flickering. He lied better than Tommy did. And not to save his own skin. He did it for the minute we hadn't even secured yet. Christine yanked Tommy toward the center of the dance floor. "Let's just dance. Now. Let them stand out there in the hall." Tommy didn't move. He was staring at me at the folder in my hand, at Daisy's phone at the blank screen. For the first time all night, he realized that things he thought were just props could become evidence. The microphone, the screen, the gift folder, the muddy dress. "Dad," he said, his voice dropping, "what do you want me to do to make you stop?" There was zero repentance in that question, just pure calculation. "The truth, I will tell Mom." "Not Mom, the people you lied to. In front of everyone. You lied in front of everyone." Christine dropped his hand. "If you start apologizing right now, I am leaving." Tommy looked at her like it was the most terrifying threat on earth. Then he looked at Sarah and chose fear again. "Dad, give me an hour." Your mother already had her hour stolen. While I was talking to my son, Eleanor marched over to Victor. "Remove that tech from the board. He is clearly going off script." Ryan heard her and put his hands flat on the faders like he could physically shield the screen. Victor looked at him, then at me. "Ryan stays," the GM said, "until the end of the block." "What block?" Eleanor demanded. Victor didn't answer. Sometimes neutrality starts with keeping your mouth shut. Sarah stepped closer to me. "Are you really going out there?" she asked. "Yes, and not just for me. I didn't get it at first. For who else?" She looked at Daisy, at Ryan, at Sam holding a hijack script in his hands. "For the people they are going to tell later. It was nothing, everyone is fine." That was Sarah. Even now, when they were trying to wrap her pain in a napkin and sweep it off the table, she saw the toll it was taking on strangers. I took her hand. "Do you want to walk out there with me?" She looked at the ballroom. The opening chords of the first dance were already playing. The crowd was perking up. Music always pretends it just solved the problem. "No, if I walk out there next to you, they are just going to watch to see if I have forgiven them. I refuse to be their absolution." "Then I will go alone." "Don't yell, Mike." "I won't." "Don't call her filthy names." "I won't." "And don't beat Tommy with your words so hard you end up ashamed of yourself later." I let out a joyless laugh. He had already done enough to be ashamed of without my help. Sarah nodded, pulled the blanket off her shoulders, and slipped my suit jacket back on. That was a choice. She wasn't fully hiding the stain, but she wasn't putting herself on display for pity either. She was choosing dignity. The kind that doesn't ask a room for permission. "Tell them the truth," she said, "but leave me the right to walk out first." "I will." Sam stepped up onto the stage. The second mic was resting on the side table next to a vase. Not hidden, just sitting there waiting for a coincidence to become a choice. I already knew the sequence. I wouldn't open with an accusation. First, a question for Tommy. Let the room hear how he answers when the truth is sitting 2 feet away from the projector. The first dance music was in full swing. Christine took a step toward Tommy, but Sam raised a hand. "Folks," he said, cutting through the track. "Before the first dance, we have one very important family moment left. A word from the father of the groom." Eleanor spun toward him. "We cut that." The microphone picked up her voice. The room didn't hear the words, just the venom in the tone. A few guests stopped clapping. Christine froze in the middle of the dance floor. Tommy looked at me like I had already thrown a punch. I picked up the second mic off the table. It felt light, almost like a toy. But in that room, that little piece of plastic weighed more than the folder with the lease in my pocket. A microphone doesn't make a man right. It just shows everyone who is terrified of the sound. Mike Victor murmured as he walked past. "No threats, please. Keep it clean." I didn't walk to the center of the stage. I stopped at the edge of the dance floor, leaving an open lane so Sarah could leave whenever she wanted. She was standing by the service doors. Not in the shadows, not in the spotlight, just exactly where she chose to be. The room went bizarrely quiet. 200 people didn't know what was coming, but they could already smell this wasn't a toast. Tommy tried to force a smile. "Dad, maybe after the dance." "No." Christine whispered something to him, and he turned completely white. Sam backed away to the soundboard. Ryan rested his finger on the button to cast Daisy's phone. Daisy stood next to Victor, holding her device screen down like a piece of evidence that could no longer be buried. I raised the microphone and looked at my son, not Christine. "Tommy, I am going to ask you one question right now. You tell the truth and I will stop at your answer." The room stopped breathing, and for the first time all night, I realized there was no going back, not even for a father and son. "Tommy," I said into the mic, "your mother is standing by those service doors right now. She isn't asking for gifts. She isn't asking for the photographers. And she isn't asking to cancel your wedding. She is asking for exactly one thing, for her son to stop calling her humiliation an accident." The room was so dead silent I could hear a glass clink against a saucer 3 tables away. Tommy took a step forward. "Dad, don't do this. I am asking you a question. Have you seen the video? Do you know what Christine said about the old lady going to dry off right before the fall? Do you know she hit your mother with her shoulder? Knowing all of that, are you ready to stand here in front of everyone and repeat that your mother simply lost her footing?" Christine turned to him. Tommy, just his name, but there was more of an order in it than a scream. Eleanor stood up. "This is completely unacceptable. Michael, you are publicly pressuring your son on his wedding day." "No," I said. "I am publicly handing him back the choice he already made in secret." Tommy stood frozen between me and Christine. For the first time tonight, he wasn't standing behind her or next to her. He was standing alone. The guests saw it too. A few people turned to look at Sarah. She wasn't looking at her son with pity. She wasn't begging. She was just waiting. "Answer," I said. He licked his lips. "I don't want to discuss this in front of everyone." "You already discussed it in front of everyone. You told them your mother got spooked." Christine grabbed his arm. "If you let him do this, he is going to destroy us." Tommy closed his eyes, and I finally got it. The trap didn't spring because I was smarter. It sprang because the truth sometimes just backs a man into a corner where there is nowhere left to hide. At the first table, someone put their phone down. At the second, Christine's bridesmaids stopped smiling. The room didn't know the evidence yet, but they could hear that the groom was terrified to answer. "I will answer," Tommy said, "but not like this." Christine let out a massive sigh of relief. He had found her an exit door. "Like what then?" I asked. "Normally, off mic, without all this pressure. Dad, you taught me this yourself. Family business stays in the family. You don't air it out in public. Family doesn't shove family into the mud in public." Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "Jesus." It wasn't loud, but the mic caught the exhale of the room. Tommy heard it too. "I am not refusing to apologize," he said. "I am just asking you to let us finish our wedding. So first, these guests need to raise a glass to your new family, watch you dance, congratulate you on your shiny new business, and then later in some dark corner, you will toss your mother a sorry." He flared up. "Don't twist my words. I am trying to put things back on track." I held up the folder with the certificate, but I didn't open it. "A few minutes ago, you put my gift up on that screen as your launch pad. I stayed quiet for a beat because I wanted to hear the truth from my son, not a negotiation. Right now, you are haggling." Christine took a step forward. "There it is, the money. I knew it." "No," I said, "the money comes later. Right now, this is about my wife's right not to be treated like a mud stain under your first dance." The guests weren't looking at the screen anymore. They were looking at Sarah, and that was incredibly dangerous for the newlyweds. Sarah wasn't playing the victim, which made her look vastly more authentic than any slideshow. Eleanor navigated between the tables toward Christine's relatives and whispered something to the bride's father. He scowled and stood up ready to intervene. "Michael," he projected across the room, "we all respect your wife, but you are turning the kids' celebration into an adult brawl." "If you respected my wife," I answered, You would be asking why your daughter laughed when she fell. The bride's father didn't sit down immediately, but even he couldn't find an answer to that. Sarah took a step back toward the service doors. I caught it in my peripheral vision and raised a hand so no one would follow her. Sarah is going to walk out of this room now if she chooses to, I said. Not because she is ashamed, but because she is not obligated to stand here as a prop in your version of events. Christine practically snapped. Who is keeping her here? Let her go if she wants to ruin everyone's night so badly. The sentence came out a little too honest. It hit the room harder than any accusation I could have made. Up until then, Christine could still play the panic bride. Now she had shown everyone that Sarah walking out wasn't a tragedy because a woman was in pain. It was a tragedy because it ruined the aesthetic. Tommy whispered, Chris, shut up. No, she yelled. I am sick of this. Since this morning, everything has revolved around your family, your grudges, your money. This is my wedding. Sarah stopped. She slowly turned to face her. Yours, Sarah said. That is why I am leaving, so I don't get in your way. There was no sarcasm in those words, just the kind of bone-deep exhaustion you feel when you no longer have to prove you are bleeding. A few women at the nearest tables looked down at their plates. One of the older guests murmured, Good Lord, that poor girl. Christine heard it, and she panicked. Not at the meaning of the words, but at the realization that the room's sympathy was shifting away from her. That is not what I meant. Today you never seem to mean what you say, I said. But somehow, every single time, my wife ends up on the ground. Sarah looked at me. Mike, you take it from here. I will be by the exit. I nodded. She wasn't running from the truth. She was walking away from being a piece of evidence people could stare at. Two women at the edge table silently pushed their chairs in, clearing a path for her. Nobody clapped, and that was exactly right. Eleanor realized she was losing the room and pivoted. Michael, since you are so obsessed with the truth, why don't you tell the guests honestly you want to take the gift back right now because you never liked your daughter-in-law? There it was, the last rope, the money. If I grabbed it the wrong way, everything would get simple again. Angry dad blackmails kids with cash. That is why I hadn't opened the folder. I am not taking the gift back, I said. You either give a gift or you don't. I haven't given anything yet. A murmur swept through the room. Now the guests remembered the slide on the screen, our family name, the venue, the future business. The newlyweds had already soaked up applause for something that, legally and morally, didn't belong to them yet. Tommy lifted his head. Dad, you promised. I promised a son who would bring a woman into this family capable of respecting his mother. Not a woman who planned to shove her out of the frame. Christine went white. You have no right to talk about me like that. I have every right, but I am not even saying everything yet. At the soundboard, Ryan suddenly lifted Daisy's phone, now plugged in with a short cable. The screen still showed the blank venue logo. The proof wasn't waiting for my anger. It was waiting for the exact right moment. Christine's father stood up again, but this time he didn't step forward. He looked at his daughter. Christine, he said quietly, but the room heard it. What does he mean, plan to shove her? Christine spun toward him, absolute horror on her face. Until that second, she had been fighting me. Now the question was coming from her side of the aisle. Eleanor hissed, Don't engage, he is manipulating you. But the word was already out there. At the vendor table, two men exchanged a look. One of them had been congratulating Tommy on the new venue just yesterday. Now he quietly slid his business card back into his pocket. Sam took 2 steps closer to me so he wouldn't have to shout across the room. Michael, he said into his mic officially, you have the floor as the father of the groom. Go ahead. Now it wasn't a rogue speech. The stage itself had carried me exactly where they didn't want me to go. Eleanor pressed her lips into a thin line. Christine stared at the screen like it was a locked door, and someone was already rattling the keys on the other side. Tommy stood paralyzed. I held up the folder, but again, I didn't open it. I am not going to talk for long, I said, and I am not going to ask this room to judge based on my words. Christine whipped around to Ryan. Don't you dare play anything. The mic caught that too. The room grew even quieter. When someone is terrified of a screen before anything is even on it, A crowd starts listening differently. Sarah was already by the exit, but she hadn't left yet. I could see her in my periphery, standing tall, my jacket on her shoulders, the mud stain below, and our whole life wedged between the two. I always tried to shield her. She always tried to weather the storm. I looked at my son, Tommy, for the last time. Are you ready to tell these people that your mother didn't throw a fit, didn't ruin your wedding, and didn't put herself in the mud? He stayed silent. The answer was already in that silence, but I waited anyway. Not for me, for Sarah. Christine hissed, "Don't answer him." And that is when I knew the sentence I took the microphone for couldn't be delayed any longer. I turned to the room. "Before you raise your glasses to this new family," I said, "I want you to see exactly what my wife paid with her dress and her dignity for today." Ryan hit the button. The white logo on the screen flickered and died. The screen didn't go completely dark. The logo vanished, and for a split second, a black square reflected the chandeliers. Someone in the crowd coughed nervously. Christine lunged toward the soundboard, but Victor held up a hand. "Stand down," he said quietly. It was the first word he had spoken all night that didn't sound like hospitality. It sounded final. A shaky image popped onto the massive screen. The arch after the rain, the wet path, the white chairbacks, guests holding phones. Not a movie, not an edit, just a raw, vertical video shot from a waitress's pocket. "You have no right," Christine screamed. "We have the right to watch the end of what you called an accident," I replied. Eleanor rushed Sam. "Cut the audio." Sam didn't cut it. He stood by the board, his own mic lowered, watching the screen like a man who had already made his choice and wasn't going to pretend this was a glitch. On the recording, Sarah carefully shifted her footing toward the edge of the path. Christine leaned in toward her bridesmaid. The voice rang out crystal clear even as Daisy's phone bounced. "Once the old lady goes to dry off, the frame will be clean. Just don't stand behind me." The color drained from the room in a wave. First the front row, where the bride's parents sat. Then the bridal party. Then the tables that had been smiling just a minute ago. People were putting the pieces together in reverse. They had just clapped for this woman. After those words, Christine's father slowly sat down like his knees had just given out. Tommy stared at the screen with a look that said he wasn't watching a video, he was watching his own spine snap at the arch. He stood right there and did nothing. Christine whispered, "That is not how it sounded." But the room had just heard exactly how it sounded out by the arch, right before Sarah fell. The video kept playing. Sarah moved her foot. Christine dropped her shoulder. A tiny, calculated, practically invisible strike, unless you knew exactly where to look. Now everyone knew. The massive screen didn't just magnify the shove, it magnified the intent. Sarah swayed. On the recording, someone gasped. Then the mud that saw my hand reaching in. Tommy's voice, "Mom." And then his footsteps. Not toward his mother, toward Christine. The video wasn't making accusations, it was just showing the timeline. Christine practically threw herself at Ryan. "Turn it off." Victor stepped between her and the board. "We are watching it to the end. This is illegal. File a complaint after the reception." The GM said it evenly, but the room heard the shift. The venue was no longer protecting the pretty version of events. On the screen, Christine buried her face in Tommy's chest. Her shoulders shook, and then the mic picked up the laugh. That exact same short, smothered sound I had heard at the arch. The sound Sarah would remember long after the mud washed out. At the bridesmaid table, one girl slapped a hand over her mouth. Another looked down at her lap. They knew that laugh. They spoke that language. Tommy stared at the screen like it was a death sentence he had written himself. On the recording, his own voice echoed, "It is okay, don't worry." Now that phrase didn't belong to the bride anymore. It belonged to the room. Everyone saw exactly who he was comforting. I lowered the microphone for a second, not because I was out of words, because sometimes the silence that follows the truth does heavier lifting than you ever could. Sarah didn't look away from the exit. She watched it to the bitter end, not watching herself in the mud, but watching her son standing next to Christine. When the video stopped, nobody clapped. The silence was louder than a scream. A few guests physically took a step back. Not dramatically, they just stopped wanting to stand near the blast radius. Christine saw it and she went genuinely, terrifyingly pale. "Tommy, tell them," she whispered. "Tell them it wasn't like that." But there was no like that left to sell. I raised the mic again. "Tommy, I will repeat the question. Not for me this time, for them." I swept my hand across the room. "Did your mother throw a fit?" He stood there, white as the napkin on the sweetheart table. Christine dug her nails into his sleeve. "Don't," she hissed. "He is trying to break you." Tommy looked at her, then at Sarah. Sarah didn't step toward him. She didn't try to help him. She didn't offer a reassuring look that said he could still crawl back without paying the toll. Because the toll had already been collected. "No," he said. One word. Late. Small. But the room heard it. "My mother didn't make a scene," Tommy pushed out like every syllable was being ripped out of his throat with a hook. Christine bumped her, and then we. "I handled it wrong." "Wrong?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "I did the wrong thing. I didn't go to my mom." By the exit, Sarah lowered her head just a fraction. Not out of relief, out of the crushing realization that the right words had finally arrived, long after nothing could ever bring back that first step he didn't take. Christine backed away from Tommy. "Are you serious? You are choosing them right now?" "I am telling you what I saw. You are betraying me at our own wedding." That sentence split the room in half because everyone had just watched in high definition exactly who got betrayed first. Christine's father covered his face with his hand. Eleanor tried to say something, but that ironclad circle of confidence she had been projecting all day was gone. I didn't push my son any further. He had given the bare minimum, but he had given it in front of the people he had lied to. That was enough for the next step. "Thank you," I said. "Now about the gift." The vendor table shifted again. One guy, a man I used to rig lights with at an old downtown club, wasn't looking at Tommy anymore. He was looking at me. He realized this wasn't a tantrum, this was a matter of business reputation. The family disgrace had just breached the family walls. I opened the folder. The paper rustled louder than it should have. On the first page was the logo of an old friend of mine, the owner of that small historic venue. On the second page, the equipment manifest, the subsidized lease, the consulting hours, the vendor contacts. Not a briefcase full of cash. A network of trust I had spent decades building. A few minutes ago, I said a slide featuring our family's gift flashed on that screen. You all saw it. The newlyweds were already soaking up applause for something that hadn't even been handed over yet. Christine tried to cut in. "Because you promised it." "Yes, I promised it." I looked at my son. "I promised you a launch pad, not for obedience, not for pretty speeches, for building a family. Not a window display where you can crop your mother out like a bad pixel." Tommy dropped his head. He knew exactly where this was going. Christine was still trying to read it as a negotiation. "So you want to punish us financially?" "No, I want to make sure my name and Sarah's name aren't used to open a business that started with her humiliation." Somewhere in the crowd, someone said quietly, "Damn right." It wasn't applause. It was more like permission. Someone finally saying out loud what half the room was already thinking, but was too polite to say in front of the bride and groom. Eleanor lunged forward. "You cannot cancel a wedding gift in front of the guests. I can refuse to sign something I haven't given yet." I held up the last page. Where my signature was supposed to be the line was completely blank. Christine stared at that empty line like she was looking at a hole in the floor. Tommy figured it out faster. He knew the names in that folder. He knew those guys weren't signing on for his last name, they were signing on for my word. And if I pulled my word right now, no shiny slideshow was going to open those doors for him. "Dad," he said, and for the first time all night, there was no anger in his voice, just sheer panic. "Don't do this right now." "When?" "After the dance. After the toasts. After the guests go home with your version of the story." He didn't answer. "You asked for an hour," I went on. "Your mother got seconds today. The seconds between the shove and your choice. And you didn't choose her. Christine sneered. If you take the gift back right now, everyone is just going to think you are a vindictive old man. Let them think that, but they will think it after they watch the video. At those words, a few guests glanced back up at the screen, even though it was just the venue logo again. The evidence was still doing its job, even in the dark. I held up the final page of the certificate. I am not signing this document today, not because I am stingy with my money, but because a family business does not begin with a woman the future boss wanted out of the frame and the future owner left in the mud. Eleanor gasped. You are going to regret this. I already do, I said. I regret that I spent so long confusing silence with protecting my son. Somewhere in the room, a chair scraped back, then another. People weren't storming out en masse. They just stopped being props for the party. Someone took a gift box off the sweetheart table. Someone slipped an envelope back into their purse. Someone walked out toward the hallway where Sarah was standing, didn't say a word, and just gave her a nod. Tommy saw it, and he finally understood. I wasn't just taking back a piece of paper. The respect of the entire room was evaporating right in front of him. Christine grabbed his arm. Tell them it doesn't count. Tell them he has no right. Tommy looked at the blank signature line, then at his mother by the exit. Mom, he said. Sarah didn't move toward him. Mom, Tommy repeated. Sarah stood perfectly still by the doors. He said the word like the sound of it alone should earn him the right to walk over to her. But that right doesn't come back with a sound, especially not after you publicly threw it away for a dress, some makeup, and a first dance. Not now, she said. My son flinched like he had been slapped. Mom, I just said it. You said it when you saw the screen. That was the sharpest, truest thing anyone could have said. Not a single guest could hide behind the narrative that Tommy had a sudden awakening of love. He told the truth when lying became mathematically impossible. I closed the folder. The certificate is not getting signed today, I said, and it is not getting quietly handed over next week either. Tomorrow morning. I am calling every name in this folder and telling them my family project is canceled. Christine went ghost white. Your family project? Yes, because it was built on my connections, my name, and the money Sarah and I saved up. And we didn't save it so we could be ushered through a side door and wiped off on a floor mat. The lighting vendor stood up from his table. Mike, he said, if you are pulling out, my contract is void. I don't work without your sign-off. He didn't shout it, but it echoed louder than applause. Because for the first time, the consequences weren't coming from me. They were coming from the people who just saw exactly what the newlyweds were building their future on. Another guy at the vendor table nodded. Pull my contact info too. I am not going into business with people like that. Tommy stared at them in absolute horror. Christine glared at me. You set this whole thing up. No, I said. You just showed everybody who you are. At a table in the back, an older couple silently pulled their envelope out of the gift basket. Not making a scene, just opting out. Christine saw it and lost her mind. See? Look what you did. People are taking back their gifts at my wedding. It is not your wedding, the woman at the back table said surprisingly loud. We aren't giving gifts to people who laugh when a mother falls. Her husband took her arm, but he didn't stop her. It was the first time the guests themselves had spoken up. Not vendors, not family, just ordinary witnesses. Christine opened her mouth but couldn't find a single word. Her mother found one. You have all fallen for a theatrical stunt. One old man decides to punish his daughter-in-law over an accident, and you are all ready to string her up over a video with no context. And then Daisy, who had been standing next to Victor like a ghost, raised her hand. The context was before the video, she said. I heard Christine talk about the old lady. I didn't want to get involved, but she said it before the fall. The manager twitched, but Victor froze her with a look. Daisy wasn't speaking like a waitress breaking a rule anymore. She was speaking like someone they had just tried to bully into deleting the truth. Christine's father stood up again. This time he didn't look at me. He looked at his daughter. Did you say that? Christine froze. Dad, I was stressed. It was basically a confession. Not a legal one, not a pretty one, but a real one. Someone in the crowd let out a heavy sigh. Tommy dragged a hand down his face. Chris, why? She looked at him with pure hatred. Because your mother was ruining the aesthetic all day. After that, nobody needed the video. Even Eleanor wasn't fast enough to clamp a hand over her daughter's mouth. Christine's bridesmaids wouldn't even look at her. One of them moved her bouquet off the table onto a chair like it was suddenly contaminated. Christine's father sat down, not out of weakness, out of shame. He finally realized he hadn't been protecting his daughter from an attack, he had been protecting her right to be cruel. Tommy started walking towards Sarah, fast, almost at a jog, like speed could somehow make up for the fact that he hadn't moved a muscle when it mattered. The guests parted for him. Nobody was blocking his path to his mother now. The walkway was dry level and wide open. Mom, I am sorry, he said. Sarah looked at him calmly, not cruelly, just completely drained of her instinct to save him. For what? She asked. He faltered. For everything. That doesn't count. Tommy looked back at the room. He desperately wanted someone to throw him a lifeline, to feed him the right line, to accept his blanket apology and just close the tab. But the room was silent. For not coming over to you, he said. For saying you tripped. Yes, and. He looked back at Christine. She was standing there, pale, furious, humiliated but completely unrepentant, for being too scared to ruin the wedding. Sarah nodded. Now that sounds like the truth. Tommy reached out his hand, but she didn't let him hug her. Not now, Mom. Not in front of the guests. Not in the exact spot where you just tried to make me convenient. He dropped his hand. To the room, that rejection hit harder than if she had slapped him. The delayed apology didn't magically transform into a beautiful moment of reconciliation. It just stayed late. Christine yelled out, "Perfect! Is everyone happy now? Can we move on?" Nobody answered. Sam killed the background track for the first dance. He just hit a button, and the room instantly realized that a party without trust just sounds like noise. "Taking a 10-minute break, folks," Sam said into the mic. Nobody argued. Usually a break at a wedding means the entrees are coming out or the photo booth is open. Here it sounded like a window for people to decide if they even wanted to sit at these tables anymore. And people started standing up. Not everyone left. Some just walked over to the windows. Some stepped out into the hall. Some went over to Sarah. But the center of the room emptied out so fast it felt like someone had kicked out a load-bearing pillar. The newlyweds were standing by the sweetheart table, the absolute epicenter of the wedding just 20 minutes ago. Now it looked like a stage after a disastrous opening night. Eleanor was trying to stop the bleeding with a smile. "Friends, please, it is just high emotions. Everyone will calm down in a minute." One of her friends, a woman in a navy dress, answered quietly but firmly, "Eleanor, don't. We saw it with our own eyes. 2 words. We saw her shoulder check her. Nobody told us a story. We watched it happen." Christine's father walked up to his daughter. "Let's go talk." "About what?" She snapped. "Are you against me too?" "I am against what I just heard. This is my wedding too," he said. "You just turned it into a public disgrace." Christine looked at her mother, but this time, Eleanor didn't rush in to throw herself on the grenade. Because Eleanor had just lost her biggest weapon, the absolute certainty that the room would remain polite. I walked over to Daisy. "They aren't going to fire you," Victor overheard. "Nobody is getting fired," he confirmed, "and there won't be any write-ups." Daisy nodded, but her eyes were wet. Not from relief, just from the sheer weight of realizing that sometimes the truth gets dumped squarely on the shoulders of a kid who just clocked in for a shift. Ryan unplugged the phone from the board and handed it back to her with both hands the way you hand back a passport. "Keep it," he said, "just in case." Christine heard it and flared up again. "Are you going to start texting that around?" "No," I said. "There are plenty of eyewitnesses in this room today. I didn't need a witch hunt. I just needed the lie to stop cashing checks in our name." I walked over to the sweetheart table and picked up the printed program slide. A gift from the Miller family. The cardstock was heavy, expensive, bordered in gold leaf. I didn't rip it up. I just folded it in half and slid it into the folder with the unsigned lease. This block is officially cut from the program, I told Sam. He nodded. He understood. Tommy stood nearby, looking like he was waiting for someone to stop me at the last possible second. Nobody did, not even Eleanor, because they had all seen the blank signature line, the video, and the mud. The wedding magic died the exact second accountability walked into the room. Christine suddenly sat down on a chair. She didn't collapse, she didn't faint. She just sat down like someone who had finally run out of stage to perform on. Her bridesmaids didn't rush over in a pack. One walked over. Another stayed by the window. That half measure hurt her worse than outright condemnation. "Tommy," she said, "do something." He looked at her, then at me, then at Sarah, and for the first time all night, he didn't run to Christine. He walked toward his mother. Sarah was already standing by the doors leading outside. Behind her, you could see the wet cobblestone path, the exact spot where this all started. Only now, people were parting to let her through, not because she was being shoved out of frame, but because they were ashamed to stand in her way. "Mom," Tommy said, "I am leaving with you guys." Sarah looked at him for a long time. "No," he stopped. "Why?" "Because right now you just want to run away from the shame. And I need a son who will come to me one day, not out of shame, but out of truth." I walked up to her and offered my arm. She took it without hesitation. Behind us, Christine yelled, "So you are just abandoning us?" Sarah turned around. "No, today you chose exactly where you wanted to stand." And we walked out of the room first. Outside, a light drizzle was starting to fall again. Faint, almost invisible, but the stone path gleamed exactly like it had before the fall. Only this time Sarah was walking away from the arch, not toward it. I held her hand and she didn't let go. Behind us, the venue doors swung shut. There was no music playing. The massive country club felt entirely hollow without the toasts and the MC's forced laughter. You could only hear the murmur of guests talking much quieter than usual. "Wait," Tommy shouted. We stopped at the edge of the parking lot. Sarah didn't turn around. I did. My son came running out without his jacket, his white shirt already losing its crisp, festive perfection. Christine was standing in the doorway behind him. She didn't follow. She stayed right there in the warmth and the light, waiting for him to come back with proof that the parents had cracked, the family was saved, and the gift would be delivered later. She didn't even put a coat on. She still fully believed the cold was someone else's problem. Tommy reached us and stopped 2 feet away. "Dad!" "Mom, please. I get it now." Sarah offered a tired smile. "No, Tommy, you just saw it." He flinched. "What is the difference?" "A big one. Getting it happens before the video screen. Seeing it happens when you can't lie anymore." He dropped his head. Water was beating up in his hair. When he was a kid, Sarah used to run out with a towel before he even had to explain what he had done. Today, for the first time, he was standing in front of a door that wasn't going to open on the first knock. "I don't want to lose you guys," he said. "You aren't losing us," I replied. "You are just losing the right to show up without the truth." He looked down at the folder tucked under my arm. "And what about that? Is it just gone?" There it was. Even now, it wasn't his first question, but it was way too close to the top of the list. Sarah heard it too. Her fingers didn't flinch inside my hand. "It is gone for today," I said. "What happens next doesn't depend on you begging. It depends on who you become after tonight." "Can I fix it?" "No," Sarah said. "You can't fix it. You can only stop making it worse." Tommy went quiet. He wanted to negotiate. He wanted to do what he had always done with me. Pay a little now, pay the rest later. Trade a promise for an action. Trade exhaustion for accountability. But Sarah was standing right there, and her quiet no overrode every concession I had ever made for him. "I will come over tomorrow," he said. "Not tomorrow. Come over when?" "When you can walk through our door without Christine standing behind you and without asking about the money." He looked back. Christine was still standing in the doorway. Eleanor was next to her now, but even her mother wasn't putting an arm around her. They were both staring at us like we were sucking the oxygen out of the wedding. "I don't know what to do," Tommy said. "That is the first honest thing you have said all day," I replied. He let out a pained laugh. "You always were good at keeping it short, No, I spent way too long talking and paying instead of answering. Sarah gently slipped my jacket off her shoulders and handed it back to me. Put it on, Mike. You are going to get soaked. What about you? I have a blanket in the car. She said it simply, almost like we were just running errands. And that simplicity made it easier to breathe. We weren't driving back to a party or to a moral victory. We were going back to normal life, where when someone is cold, you put a blanket over them, you don't take a picture of them. Tommy took one more step. Can I at least walk you to the car? Sarah shook her head. Not today. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. He wasn't standing in front of an offended mother he could smooth talk. He was standing in front of a woman who had officially stopped saving him from his own shame. I am going to call, he said. I am not promising I will pick up on the first ring. It was the first punishment that didn't sound like a punishment, just a door that finally had a lock on it. Christine's voice drifted over from the venue doors. Tommy, are you coming or not? She was standing on the top step. Her white dress practically glowed against the dark entrance. An hour ago, the room made her the center of the universe. Now she just looked like a person, screaming into the void, completely baffled as to why the echo wasn't clapping for her. Tommy didn't answer. That was new. Normally, he would have jumped at the first syllable. Now he just stood halfway between us and her. Wet lost no longer the triumphant groom, but not quite a son who knew how to make amends yet either. Go, Sarah said. You said it yourself. I said you aren't leaving with us tonight. Where you go next is your choice. He looked back at Christine. She heard Sarah and marched down one step. So they dragged you away. Perfect. Now it is my fault you don't have a spine. And just like that, she blew her very last chance to keep her mouth shut. Even Tommy realized it. He didn't flare up. He didn't defend her. He didn't run to hug her. He just looked exhausted. Chris, that is enough. She stopped dead. What? Enough. It wasn't liberation. It wasn't a victory. It was too little, too late. But the leash she had been yanking him around by all night finally snapped. Eleanor stepped out behind her daughter. Christine, inside. No, her father's voice echoed from the doorway. Inside. And for the first time, his voice didn't carry a request. It carried a deeply ashamed order. Christine glanced back at the guests, visible through the glass. Nobody was coming out to save the scene. She picked up the hem of her dress and walked back inside by herself. Behind her, the blank venue logo was still glowing on the big screen. Then Ryan killed the projector and the white square vanished. The wedding had officially run out of pictures to hide behind. We reached the car. I opened Sarah's door, grabbed the fleece blanket from the back seat, and draped it over her lap. She hesitated before getting in. She ran her hand over the hem of her dress where the mud had already dried into a dark crust. We will throw it out, I said. No, I looked at her surprised. Why do you want to keep it? So that someday I don't forget that I also know how to refuse forgiveness when the sun goes down. She said it without malice, just with a kind of cautious surprise at herself. Her whole life, Sarah had known how to endure, how to smooth things over, how to explain away other people's flaws. Today was the first time she refused to do her son's emotional labor for him. I got in the driver's seat, but I didn't start the engine. Through the glass, Tommy was still standing in the rain. He wasn't walking back inside, and he wasn't walking toward us. He was just standing in the dark between two doors. And for the first time in his life, nobody was whispering in his ear to tell him which one was the right choice. Does it hurt? I asked. Sarah knew I didn't mean her hand. A lot. I wanted to protect you earlier. You picked me up. That was enough for that minute. And then she stared out the windshield, watching the lights of the country club blur in the rain. But then you stopped begging for me. That was what I actually needed. I tossed the folder with the certificate onto the back seat. The paper inside felt impossibly heavy, even though it weighed practically nothing. It is strange how a document that wakes up as a gift can go to sleep as a boundary. What about Tommy? I asked. Sarah stayed quiet for a long time. Not today. That was enough. It wasn't a never, but it wasn't an, of course, sweetie, either. In the side mirror, I saw Sam. He stepped out under the awning, raised a hand, but didn't walk over. Victor was standing right behind him. They understood that not every thank you needs to be spoken out loud in a parking lot after a blown-up wedding. I gave them a nod. Sam nodded back and went inside. Daisy flashed by the service doors, already wearing her jacket over her uniform. Victor said something to her, and for the first time all night, she smiled. At least she hadn't been made the scapegoat. I started the car. The headlights swept across the wet path, the white arch, and the edge of the lawn where the dark earth was still exposed. In the daylight, they had prepped that spot for beautiful photographs. By nightfall, it had become a boundary line. Before that line, our family survived on patience. After it, we were only going to survive on the truth. Tommy was still standing by the entrance, perfectly still. He wasn't waving, he wasn't screaming, he wasn't falling to his knees. And that was for the best. We had enough theater for one day. Sarah kept her eyes on the road ahead. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" "Saying it in front of everyone." I thought about it. The blank screen flashed in my mind, the empty signature line. The look on my son's face when he realized he hadn't just lost Elise, he had lost my respect. "I regret that I had to do it. That is different." "Yeah." We pulled out of the parking lot slowly. Through the venue windows, I could see the guests breaking off into small clusters. There was no longer a tight, happy circle around the sweetheart table. Christine was sitting next to her mother, staring blankly at the dark projector screen. Tommy was still outside alone. Sarah suddenly rested her hand on top of mine. "Mike." "Yeah, thank you for not screaming." I let out a dry laugh. I wanted to. I know. We drove the rest of the way in silence. The silence wasn't light, but it belonged to us. No microphones, no guests, no one else's script. In the back seat sat a folder with an unsigned contract. When we got home, Sarah paused before getting out of the car. She ran her hand over the muddy hem of her dress one last time and said, "We will take it to the dry cleaners tomorrow. If they won't take it, then we will throw it out. All right?" She looked at me. "And I might not answer my phone tomorrow." "You don't have to." The windows of our house were dark, but when I unlocked the door and flipped on the hallway light, Sarah walked in first. Not like a woman who had been ushered out of a wedding, like a woman who owned her life and had finally stopped apologizing for someone else's shame. If this story struck a chord with you, drop a like and let me know in the comments what you would have done if you were in Michael's shoes. This poignant story serves as a profound mirror for our own lives, reminding us that the foundations of a truly beautiful life are never built on superficial appearances or the silencing of those who love us most. It teaches us that true dignity does not look for validation from a crowd of 200 onlookers, nor does it hide its flaws behind a perfect staged photograph. When we choose to embrace honesty over a curated illusion, we reclaim the power to define our own worth and protect the people who have sacrificed everything for our journey. The narrative powerfully demonstrates that a mother's love is fiercely resilient, yet it must never be traded as currency for someone else's comfort or convenience. True maturity begins the exact moment we stop looking for a compromise with injustice and finally summon the courage to stand up for the truth, even when it is painful. We must realize that the connections that truly matter in this world are not bought with financial gifts or secured through social status, but are forged in the quiet fire of mutual respect and unwavering loyalty. Walking away from a toxic environment is not an act of weakness or malice. It is a profound declaration of self-respect and an essential step toward emotional freedom. In our daily lives, we are constantly challenged to decide whether we will be active protectors of human dignity or mere silent spectators to the humiliation of others. The story urges us to remember that an apology loses its healing power when it is offered only because a lie became impossible to maintain in the light of day. True accountability requires us to face the consequences of our choices without hiding behind the influence or the demands of others. By setting firm boundaries, we do not close the door on love, but we establish the essential conditions under which genuine reconciliation can someday take place. Let us strive to live authentically, ensuring that our actions behind closed doors align perfectly with the values we boldly profess in public. Ultimately, a life well lived is measured not by the applause of a temporary audience, but by the quiet peace in our hearts when we know we stood by what is right. By choosing truth over temporary comfort, we invite a deeper sense of wholeness, respect, and enduring peace into our everyday existence.